Hello Fairbanks, welcome to our Facebook Live. I'm Karen Gaborik, Superintendent for the Fairbanks North Starborough School District, and very happy to be with you here today. So we have a few different topics that we're going to be talking about. I'll talk about our official enrollment number for this year. I also want to talk a little bit about the F35 bed down, and I'll share that with you. And then look at some of our school designators, talk about our district graduation rate, and then a really great program that we have here in the district over at Innovations, our Innovations program over at Lathrop High School. So, okay, in October, every single school district in the state does what's called a 20-day count, and the number of students that are included in that count determines, it's the very first number that's involved with the funding that comes from the state to school districts. So it's a really important time. So I just wanted to share that our official enrollment number from that 20-day count is 13,235. The interesting thing about this that I want to share is the good news is a year ahead of time we have to project what we think that count might be. And so we're actually 41 students above our projection, which is great. We would much rather be above projection. If you followed budget the past few years, last year we were significantly below projection. And the problem with that is you budget at your projection, and if you're below it, then you're not getting the money that you were anticipating. So to be over is good news. So 41 students over projection. But the important piece is that we're 44 students less, actual students less than we were last year at this time. So our overall enrollment in the school district continues to decline. With that, I want to move to the impact of the F35 bed down and show everybody some numbers, and this enrollment conversation will sort of continue. So we're going to switch to some slides right now. The first slide that we have, you can see that district enrollment graph there, and so I think it's just really interesting to look since 2005, 2006 to this year where we're at. In 2005, 2006 we were at 14,516 students, and then again this year down to 13,235. So, you know, a couple places where it's flat, but in general a decline in student enrollment, and I think that's reflective of the overall decline in general population that our area has been experiencing. So then the next slide, this shows, so this is a combination of data from the growth management plan that the Fairbanks North Starborough had commissioned a few years ago. So last fall, that growth management plan, the results of that were presented borough-wide, and specifically at a school board meeting, we looked at the chapter that was specific to education. So what's interesting about this chart is, again, you can see enrollment, actual enrollment. You can see the projected impact of the F35s. You can see the baseline. The growth management plan basically projected that enrollment would be increasing, and then you can see the flat line, the blue flat line, would be what would happen if our enrollment just stays status quo. And that's important because that blue flat line is actually closer to reality than some of those projections. So the next slide, this one with the green bar graph, shows originally with that growth management plan how many students were projected each year to come, additional students to come to the district as part of the F35 bed down, and knowing that most of those families will live in the North Pole Eielson areas. The important thing about this is that what was predicted and what's actually happening are a little different. What is actually happening is that we're seeing about half of the students that were projected to come about a year later. So you can see that in 2018-19, about 100 additional students with the F35s were projected to come. We're at this year, 19-20, we're actually seeing about 50, and again, 1 year later. So then the next slide, this is important. So you can see the actual enrollment numbers. Again, that's that similar graph that we've been looking at. You can see what the Department of Labor predicted student enrollment would be like. And so the growth management plan was based on that Department of Labor prediction. So I basically have again, flatlined our enrollment projections, because clearly what the Department of Labor was predicting and what's actually happening are two different things. So when I look at the district, and we determine what the impact on our schools will be. We are not using the Department of Labor predictions. So then the next slide is kind of where we're at. This is the projection again. You can see the actuals. You can see if all of the students that were predicted to come with the F-35s, where we would be at. If 60% of those students come, you could see where we would be at with the red line. On the next slide, actually I'm going to skip this slide because this one's kind of hard to see. So let's go to the next blue graph. So here's where we're at with the F-35. So based on the original projections from the growth management plan, which we know we're actually seeing fewer students actually coming. This is an important slide. So you can see actual enrollment numbers on October 2019, and that's that dark blue, right? And that number doesn't change because we're just, what's that 2019 number? How many seats would be needed to then accommodate students that were projected to come for the F-35s? That's the lighter blue. So you can see that it's very small in 2019-20, and then it increases a little bit for a few years. The white is the important piece. So in our schools, the whites in the North Pole Eielson schools, the white indicates how many extra seats would still be available overall in the North Pole Eielson schools. So that's really important because originally, when we were talking about the F-35s coming, there was concern that we might need to be building a new school. So our conclusion is not only do we not need to be building a new school, we're going to have adequate space within our schools and still some space there, right? And so that is not to say that, especially in the North Pole area, depending on where people live and how they come and when they come, that we might not need to look at some school boundary adjustments. That's very possible. So, just as an example, perhaps there's more kids living in the Midnight Sun area and than in the Tickosick Brown area, and we might have to do a boundary adjustment. That's possible. So we'll just keep an eye on things, and of course we're working really closely with those principals, with the numbers that they have and also the people that they see moving into their areas and the kids that are coming. That was the elementary school graph. So the next slide is actually the secondary school graph. So this would be Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School, and then also North Pole Middle and North Pole High School. Exact same concept. So the bright yellow is basically just here's our number of students in 2018-19, just all the way across that flat projection. We know that'll fluctuate, but actually it's been going down, so we'll see. Then F-35s, what's anticipated will come, the lighter yellow, and then how many seats are available overall in the North Pole secondary schools. So again, you can see there is space available in those schools. Now, boundary changes in those schools might not necessarily happen because, again, you have Eielson Junior Senior High School, North Pole Middle School, North Pole High School. So those are, it's a different type of configuration than at the elementary level. So let's just look at maybe one more slide. Look at the enrollment trends by school. Actually, we'll go through a couple of these slides because these are interesting. So you can see this next slide is, you can see where Anderson is the blue line, right? They've kind of been down on a decline, but you can see a little uptick there at the end. Crawford is the yellow line, and then Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School is the gray line. So a little bit of an uptick with those this year, which was anticipated as people move on to Eielson Air Force Base. So then looking at the next slide, the elementary schools in the North Pole area. So again, you can see the blue line is Midnight Sun, North Pole E is the red line, Salcha is the black line, and Tickosick Brown is the yellow line. Right at the end, look at the very end, far on the right, a little bit of a downturn, right, this year. So the interesting piece about that is that Discovery Peak Charter opened this year. They have 198 students as their student target. So they've actually pulled from the North Pole elementary schools. So that's why that's there. That's why we're seeing a little bit of a downtick with those particular schools. And then just to keep this going, the next slide shows North Pole High and North Pole Middle. Again, lots of interesting fluctuations with North Pole Middle over the years. And again, remember quite a few years back, and I'd have to look, but I think it's about that 2006, 2007. After that, 6th grade was added to North Pole Middle. So you can see where they're at. And then on Eielson, Oh, and then actually the last slide is the entire student enrollment trend in all of the North Pole and Eielson schools. So you can see right again at the right, a bit of an increase there overall, as anticipated in those schools. So not as many quite as fast as the growth management plan suggested might happen, but again, we're starting to see students coming. So that's the end of our slides. So I just wanted to share that with folks. There's been a lot of conversation and dialogue over the past few years about how the F-35s, now that people are starting to move into the Fairbanks area, how what impact that bed down is having on enrollment in our school district, specifically in the North Pole and Eielson areas. We know that families, military families, some live in town as well, so we're monitoring those schools. The bottom line is, in all of our schools, we have lots of capacity, and so we're feeling pretty comfortable with our ability to accommodate the students that come our way. So that's great news for us. Okay, I'm going to switch topics a little bit and talk a little bit just about a piece of the school accountability, the district and school accountability plan that is statewide that the district has to follow. And there's two really important pieces that I wanted to share. One is that for the first time in, I think, decades, the graduation rate in the school district is now over 80%, which is awesome. So we have been on this slow increase over the past few years, and so we just crossed the 80% threshold, which is really great. I think when I started, it was down close to 70. It might even have been 69%. It was close to 70%. So we've been making great progress, and I really attribute so much appreciation to the schools, and especially, of course, when you're talking about graduation rate, our high schools, and making sure that students have all kinds of options in high school, because the traditional high school model doesn't work for every student, and when that happens, you run the risk of having dropouts, right? So if you don't have alternative programs for students to access for high school, so we've developed so many great within our schools and also in other locations, so many great alternative options for students. So if the regular high school, traditional high school isn't working for them, they can access other options. And then that helps. That gives kids and families what they need. It gets kids across the finish line with regard to graduation. They get their diploma, and then of course that really improves their ability to be successful in the next steps of their life. So huge thanks to not only the high schools and the work that they're doing, but also all the other programs out there that are options for our high school kids. So I want to talk a little bit, now I'm just going to flash this up and you won't be able to see it too well, I don't think, but every year we get school designations, we get school designators. Most of our schools land in a category of, you know what, you're on track, you're doing great. We're just going to, as a state, just kind of monitor how things are going and just keep doing the good work you're doing and just keep moving along with your normal school planning and your cycle of improvement. We always have a few schools that land in areas of support. So I'll just flash this up so you can see it, and I'll let Justice hone in just a little bit. And I'll hold it up there for a couple seconds, and I'll take it down so I can actually read it to you. Okay, so in that orange category that you saw, that's the comprehensive support category. And so in that program are Alternative Learning Systems, Fairbanks Best, Golden Heart Academy, and Star of the North. And so those are schools that we provide lots of support to. And if you notice, those are some of our alternative programs for students. And so the great news about that is that those schools get extra support from the state, even beyond what it is the district and the state provide for all the other schools. And what I really appreciate about that particular group of schools is their 4-year graduation rate sometimes is not as high as the others, but their 5-year graduation rates, I mean, they really work to get kids, again, to graduation and to get those diplomas. And so in those schools, they get some extra support so they can help students reach graduation and be successful. So really appreciative of that. The targeted group also gets support from the state, and we have Ben Eielson Junior, Senior High School, Hunter Elementary School, and Tanana Middle School. So they're going to get some support from the state too to make sure that they can help all their students be successful. So again, it's a nice, it's recognition from the state that, hey, these schools need a little bit extra help. There's some extra money that will come to those schools, and it's usually just for 1 year. And so often what schools that land in that blue category are doing are providing professional development for their teachers, and so that teachers can focus on whatever specific group of students needs some extra care and attention in that school. So I want to highlight Lathrop High School, because Lathrop High School was in that targeted support group last year, so they got some money, that $35,000, and they used it so well. I was so impressed. We had a report at our tribal consultation meeting this week from Lathrop High School, and they used that money so well. They implemented a program called Check and Connect. And so when students start to not show up to school, they have a very specific system in place where the adults in the building are touching base with kids, connecting with them, connecting with their families, and saying, hey, you know, we're starting to notice your absences are piling up a little bit too much. What can we do to help? Where are you at? What can we do to, you know, make sure that you're coming to school? Because one thing we absolutely know, if we can get kids to school, if the community and families can get kids to school, teachers can make all of the difference, and all of the support staff that we have in our buildings can help, you know, support all of the needs of our children and meet those needs. We just need them to get to school. The other thing I wanted to highlight that they've done is they've done some jumpstart programs. They have started a student leadership development program for Alaska Native students specifically. They've done some really great professional development. They did the History and Hope training. They've done some book studies. They've had Dominique Smith, who many people in our school district have experienced, have had the chance to hear Dominique speak. And then the piece I really wanted to highlight is Lathrop has done a wonderful job with their Innovations Academy. And so Principal Carly Sween kind of inherited the model, and over the past couple of years she's been able to mold it to what works well for her and her current staff. And we actually provide extra teachers specifically for that program. And so through that program, through the innovations model, they've been able to help, again, students who maybe just the regular rest of the school, it's almost like a school, it is a school within a school, help kids graduate and recover credit if they need to, and again, get to the place where they can walk across the stage and get their diploma. So super awesome. So I just want to, you know, kudos to Lathrop High School, kudos to Principal Carly Sween for all her efforts, and kudos to all the kids at Lathrop, you know, who are accessing the options they need to be successful. So that is all I have to share with you today. So thanks so much. We had we talked about enrollment and where we're at, and our count for this year and projections for next year. We talked about the F-35 bed down, and then we just talked about some of those school accountability and district accountability measures and where we're at with that. So if you have any questions, you ever want to learn more about this, please feel free to contact my office, and I can connect you with people who have tons of details around these things. So I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Looking forward to the short week next week. That'll be nice. And we'll be back after Thanksgiving with, I think, a super fun Facebook event. I'm going to read a great book and bring somebody with me, and we'll do something fun right before the holiday break. See you guys.